Hello and welcome back to the Stronghold. Today we're kicking off the video already in the deck builder screen, something I never do. And the reason we're doing this today is because I get to take the opportunity today to talk to you about one of my favorite decks in Historic Mono Blue Tempo. So let's take a quick look at the deck. Rather than going card by card on my version of the deck, what I really want to do is talk about the basics. What you're doing is using either creatures that cannot be blocked or that are very evasive and difficult to block, and playing something like Curious Obsession on them so that you immediately start converting and drawing more cards than your opponent. Also down here in the low end, we're using things like Opt for card selection. Storm Tamer here is both an evasive creature or a way to protect another evasive creature that is already wearing a Curious Obsession. Spell Pierce is another way to protect that turn 2 Curious Obsession play. And then you've got some heavier beaters in here like Brineborn Cutthroat that gets bigger every time you cast a spell on your opponent's turn. And hey, Mono Blue does that from time to time. You've got some more counter magic options here. Again, very low mana base. And then you've got some card selections. Some Brazen Borrowers, just one of the best tempo plays of all time. Sea-Dasher Octopus is another Curious Obsession clone. More counterspell shenanigans, and this is actually one of the old school cards on Arena, the triple blue Tempest Djinn 0/4 flyer, and it gets +1/+1 for each basic island you control. So in the original version of this deck on Arena, this was your win con. You ran 3 or 4 copies of this. Now the deck is down to only really needing 1 and having a lot of other control answers. The nice thing about a deck like this and about control in general is you don't have to have half your cards be win cons, because you're going to control the board state to the point that 1 or 2 copies of your win con is really all you need. In my mana base, I'm running Castle Vantress to allow me to scry more, Mystic Sanctuary to get back some of those key spells like my counters out of the graveyard, 16 copies of Snow-Covered Island, and of course Faceless Haven, the slightly neutered version in Historic, but still a pretty good option on a deck like this. So today we're going to take a look at a standard build actually made by another content creator, and then use that as a launching point to give you a more budget-friendly and more budget-approachable version for you to start looking at in Historic, because guys, this list would be a lot of wild cards all at once.
But before we get into all that, what do you say we do the awkward thing and promote the channel? Allow me to take this opportunity to invite you to subscribe to the Planeswalker Stronghold for all your new player, free-to-play, budget, and midweek Magic needs. As you can see, we aren't one of these huge channels that fluctuates tons of subscribers on any given day and doesn't even notice. Around here, you matter. Just like these fine folks here, who recently subscribed to the channel and chose to make their subscription public. You see, the YouTube algorithm seems to think that budget Arena content doesn't matter. And while I know I can't change that, I think we can. So click the subscribe button to support the channel, and tap the bell icon so you don't miss on an upload, and build a more efficient collection along the way. Now, what were we talking about? Oh, right. So the very first thing I want to do is give credit where credit is due. The standard basis for Mono Blue Tempo that I am using for this budget conversation was seen by me on Power Dragon's channel. He's definitely worth checking out. He puts out an enormous amount of content, not all of which is budget oriented, but he does a lot of stuff, and he's a very solid content creator. And although he has no idea that I'm doing this or that I even exist, probably, I just want to give him credit for this list. I don't know if he cooked it up himself, but this is where I saw it.
So let's take a minute to go through PD's list here. We are more than likely going to have to budget this up a little bit and convert it, or before we convert it to historic. Right off the bat, he is suggesting we run 4 copies of Ascendant Spirit, and I don't think he's wrong. I think that's definitely a card you should run if you have it. I'm going to assume you have 2 copies on that, because I know that you got 1 in your new player experience, and hopefully you drafted Kaldheim enough to have a 2nd copy without too much trouble. Delver of Secrets is a much more budget-friendly uncommon. Definitely run 4 of those. Really, there shouldn't be any reason not to. 4 copies of Fading Hope seems pretty solid here, although this might be a card that we cut in order to have some better options. Spell Pierce at 3 copies seems very good. Maybe a little high for historic, but maybe not. Avalanche Caller, this is another one of those that I know you have in your new player experience, so we will probably keep the 1 copy in there just as an alternate sort of win con. 3 copies of Jwari Disruption, 2 Malevolent Hermits. This is a card I think is fantastic. I don't know that you're going to have 2 copies of this, so I will probably run 1 at most. Spectral Adversary, 4 copies of a mythic. That is just not going to make my list. It's a fantastic card. If you have it, you absolutely should run it, but I have 0 expectation of you having 4 copies of this. If you do, salute. Suspicious Stowaway, 3 copies. Again, it's a lot of rares to have in this 1 card. You might have it, you might not. I do think this is a card worth running, and I will probably keep a 1 in the list. Essence Capture is another one of those long-term historic staples that recently got reprinted. In fact, I think you can see here my copies are from back in Ravnica block. Geistlight Snare, everybody loves a spirit-based counterspell. I don't see any reason not to run 3 or 4 copies here. Cemetery Illuminator, another 2 copies of a mythic. It's a 2/3 flying spirit, really good. If you've got it, run it. I'm going to assume you don't got it. Dream Shackle Geist. I think this is one of the less interesting rares. I think in Historic we can do a lot of these same things without tying up a rare card, but we'll see what we can do on that. And then to close things out, we got a couple more rares. Hall of the Storm Giants. If you've got it, there's no reason not to run it. But it's definitely not something I would spend a wild card on at this point in the season in particular. Otawara Soaring City. Since this set just came out and we haven't really opened packs on this yet, or I assume most of you have not opened your packs, my assumption is you're not going to have this, but if you've got a copy or 2, there's no reason not to run it. And then, of course, the ubiquitous Snow-Covered Islands, 17 for a total of 20 land, plus your option on Jwari Disruption, bringing you up to 23. So a very solid deck. I'm really appreciative to have found this because Mono Blue Tempo was something I had in mind, but I hadn't really been able to come up with a solid deck I felt good about. And Power Dragon really gave me a shortcut here to talk about this in Historic. And talk about it in Historic we shall. Let's go through my revised list here. You're going to see a lot of budget concessions here. But keep in mind, this is a deck I'm intending you to start building now and to continue to grow and get better year after year. One of the beautiful things about Mono Blue Tempo is it's really only got to pick up 1 or 2 good blue cards each year, and it just continues to get better and better as it does. Here are those 2 copies of Ascendant Spirit that we talked about. I know you have 1. I don't think it's unreasonable to assume you pick up a 2nd. If you don't run multiples on this, and you want to cut the Avalanche Caller, you might end up cutting the Snow base on this, but maybe not. First wildcard I am going to recommend to start building this deck is an uncommon to pick up a copy of Curious Obsession. It is a single blue aura. The creature gets +1/+1 and has, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. But beware of the second clause, because timing is important. At the beginning of your end step, if you didn't attack with the creature this turn, sacrifice Curious Obsession. Now note, you don't have to have attacked with the creature you play it on, but you have to have attacked with a creature. Next up, we've got those Delver of Secrets, followed by our Fading Hopes. The next wildcard I'm going to suggest to you is a common for Mist-Cloaked Herald. This 1/1 Merfolk Warrior for 1 can't be blocked. Just can't. There's no condition on it. It just can't be blocked. So he is a perfect candidate for your Curious Obsession. Now, Opt, of course, you get a free copy on that with the promo code SuperScry. Make sure to check that out. And the next wild card, again an uncommon, is for Spectral Sailor. A 1/1 with Flash allows you to play this on your opponent's turn and immediately go to guns with it on your turn. It also gives you an important mana sink to draw cards in case they have dealt with your Curious Obsession. Spell Pierce, I can't remember if PD was running 3 on this. I think he was. That was the number I ended up with as well. One of the concessions I made for a budget standing is running a single copy of Multiple Choice, because it is very powerful and very versatile, and I know you have a copy of it from your new player experience. So this is a great space filler until you get other cards over the next few years to help fill in some of these gaps. We talked about Avalanche Caller as a secondary win condition. Jwari Disruption is just a great counterspell, as well as a nice fix for your mana base. Here is that single copy of Malevolent Hermit. PD, I believe, was running 2 on this, but I just can't assume that you have 2 copies on this at this point in the year. Mischievous Catgeist. This is one of those cards that they've printed right now for Standard that runs very similar to Curious Obsession. So rather than burning a bunch of wild cards for multiple copies of Curious Obsession right off the bat, let's run 2 copies of Catgeist that also gives you Cat-like Curiosity and basically gives you the same functionality of drawing cards out of the combat phase. Essence Capture, we touched on that. 3 copies, I think, is exactly where PD was on that. And same with the Geistlight Snare. I believe the 3 copies were there. Patrician Geist. This is actually a card that I added off of PD's list. He was not running this. I think the idea of steering a little bit into the Spirit Tribal is a good idea here. And at 1 copy, it's fairly easy for you to have, and will really get a lot of mileage on that. If you drop this on turn 3, depending upon what you have in play, you're really maybe doubling up on the amount of damage that you're looking at doing that combat phase. Another addition that I made was Silundi Visions to give you even more card draw in this deck, as well as give you a little more land versatility. We've got a concession here to make this deck a little more budget. Dragon Turtle is pretty darn nice because it gives you some control of the board state, and it has Flash, so you can play that at the end of your opponent's turn if there wasn't anything that you needed to Geistlight Snare or Jwari Disrupt or etc. etc. A rare wild card that I'm going to recommend for this deck is for Sea-Dasher Octopus. This does something very similar to the Curious Obsession, and of course, by having multiple variations on the Curious Obsession theme, you have more cards that you can play in Brawl over the next year, as opposed to just 4 copies of Curious Obsession. But for the mutate cost of 1 and a blue, it flashes in. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. The nice thing about this is the flash, so you can wait until they've made their blocking decisions, then hit one of your, say, 1/1 creatures that they decided to let through, not only are you hitting for an additional damage by pumping it up to a 2/2, but you're going to draw a card off of it too, and that's always nice. One of the cards that we used a common wild card on earlier in the season was Faceless Agent. This will allow you to seek up one of your spirit creatures, because that is undoubtedly the most common creature in the deck. And on top of that, it gives you a 2/2 on the board as well. Always a nice card to have in any sort of tribal deck. Here we have another concession I made for budget purposes. Archmage of Immoris allows you to draw a card whenever you cast or copy an instant or a sorcery. So as you can see, one of the ways that blue tempo wins the game is by drawing more cards. This is a card that I know you have from your new player experience, so let's play it here. It doesn't really play well with the tribal synergy, but a 2/2 body that allows you to draw cards is something that's either going to give you long-term advantage, or your opponent has to deal with it. Another card that we have used a wild card on a while back was Solemn Simulacrum. This guy is going to show up in as many decks as I possibly can put him in. He's a 2/2 body. He lets you search up a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield, so it's a little bit of ramp. And when it dies, it again draws you a card, because that's what Mono Blue Tempo is really all about. Let's see here. Last up, we've got Graven Lore, another one of those concessions for budget purposes, because drawing cards is what this deck wants to do. We're already running snow mana. This can let you draw 3 cards and scry a bunch to dig down to whatever you need as your win con. Another great blue card. Obviously, it's a bit of a concession in this deck because it's not really a spirit, but it is a mythic 5/5 flyer. It's warded. I mean, this guy just does so much. For a late game play, it's pretty solid. And for the mana base, we kept it fairly similar. Don't forget, we're running those 3 copies of Jwari Disruption, as well as 2 copies of Silundi Vision. We are keeping the Hall of Storm Giants in there because we drafted this set a whole awful lot. At least that was my suggestion to you. So it's not unreasonable to think you might have a copy of this. We are still running that 17 copies of the Snow-Covered Island. And the final wild card that I suggest to you, this is going to be another one of those cards like a Sad Robot that goes in a bunch of decks over the next few years for you. Labyrinth of Scophus, I believe is how you would say that. This is basically your Maze of Ith. It allows you to remove a target attacking or blocking creature from the combat, and allows you to do some different stuff. So you can either just nullify one of their attackers, presumably their bigger one, or you can pull your own guy out of combat if they pull some kind of combat trick or something like that, and you end up on the wrong side of that with a blocker, or even an attacker for that matter. So guys, that's the deck. Just real quick, we'll go back over the wild cards. We've got an uncommon for Curious Obsession. You've got a code for Opt if you haven't used it already. That is Super Scry, and it even gives you the pirate artwork that you see here. An uncommon for Spectral Sailor. And let's see here. What else did we do with this? Is that all of our wild cards? Nope. A rare for Sea-Dasher Octopus and a rare for the Labyrinth. So guys, start building this deck. It's one of my favorites in Historic. I think it's a good place to start building this deck for yourselves in Historic, as well as still give you room to grow in this deck over years to come.
Wait, what's that? You didn't catch all that? Well, Matt wants you to know the links are in the doobly-doo. All right, so with all that having been said, don't forget, smash the like button like Hulk would. And, of course, comment and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And one last thing, myself, I'm coming to you from America, and I have noticed that about 1/3 of my viewership is coming from the US, and about 1/3 is coming from various countries. And there's about 1/3 of my viewership that is just getting lumped into other. So to let me know you got to the end of the video, throw me a comment down in there and let me know where you are watching from.